The Glimpse.
I love this personification of grief, or this metaphor for grief, as a newborn and all the things that one might do, right, to care for a newborn. The cradling, the doting, feeding, right, the milk. But then it all of a sudden grows up, the grief.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the grief needs to grow up in some way in order to be without you.
Welcome to The Glimpse. I'm your host, Camille Rankine. Chen Chen contains multitudes. He's a highly regarded poet, teacher, and editor. His debut poetry collection, When I Grow Up, I Want to Be a List of Further Possibilities, received numerous honors, and his second book of poems, Your Emergency Contact Has Experienced an Emergency, was lauded as a best book by NPR, the Boston Globe, and others. Chen Chen is our guest today on The Glimpse. Spending time with Chen Chen's poems, I find myself amazed at their deft agility, both in tone and language. Their ability to spin the reader from laughter to revelation, from levity to rigorous inquiry, from consideration of the tiniest pleasures to deep reflection and confrontation of our own flawed humanity. The poems are open-hearted, playful and pointed at the same time, asking us to step toward them, turn, and see the world as they do. Welcome, Chen. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking to you today. I've been spending so much time with your work and just thinking about, I think you're so often funny in your poems, and I think that's really hard to do. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit about what you're doing with humor and what you think about humor in poetry.
Yeah, sure. It's kind of funny to be asked about that sometimes because I actually feel that I'm such a grouch in my day-to-day life. So yeah, I think the fun that shows up in my writing, it really takes effort. And I think
Interesting.
I'm interested in that effort of moving towards a pleasure or a joy or a consideration of those things, whether I am actually feeling that in the moment or not.
Yeah.
I'm glad that there's a playfulness that seems to really come across, but yeah, most often that's not where I start.
I think personally, as a Jamaican, I find grouchiness pretty funny.
Okay, maybe that's a part of it then. Yeah.
I like a curmudgeon. I think that's just my sense of humor. But I do think there is a sense of play so often. But the play, it's like not purely lighthearted. Like it's always tethered to something weightier, like an effort and an element of work, which I think is true of a more hopeful positioning. Like it takes work to be hopeful, I think, for a lot of people.
Definitely. Yeah, hope is work. It's not just an inherent feeling that you carry around all the time as just, oh, I'm a hopeful person. I wouldn't describe myself like that. But I would say I'm a person who's interested in figuring out what hope can be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if there are people who are just like always hopeful.
I don't get that.
Just like a happy Labrador or something.
Yeah.
Good for them. I don't get it.
Waking up with positivity.
Yes,
I don't know about that.
Excited to meet the day. Just like
no.
Good for them. I don't understand. I don't relate, but
yeah, love that for them.
Love that for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to hear your poem. Can you tell us what you're going to be sharing today?
Yeah, I'm gonna read this newer poem that was published recently in Narrative. I say recently, but maybe it was a year ago? No, less than a year ago. Yeah, that's recent.
That's recent.
In poetry time, that's recent.
That's recent.
It's new.
Yeah, it's new. It's brand new.
God, gods, powers, Lord, universe. If you cannot, at the moment, give me much joy, I get it. I have asked and received many a great joy already. Just give me, if you can spare it, a small joy, say the size of a ketchup packet? If that's too much to ask for, then how about a small kindness, a tiny kindness, the size of a kiss from a dust mote? No? Okay. Would it be possible for you to take away some things then? For instance, the soreness on the right side of my neck. If you could remove maybe half a pinch of that soreness, I would leap up as though it were a great joy. I mean, it would absolutely be a great, great joy. Thank you in advance, O highest, O mightiest, O most. Still no? Well, what about this sense that everything has become very slippery? Everything is slipping right out of my fingers and faster every day. I'm not asking you to cure my fear, nor unslipify my fingers. Only if you could, if you have a quarter of a split nanosecond, it would be greatly appreciated. See, I don't need joy or kindness or ketchup. I beg you, if you are a being, a higher, some mysteries that can listen, can mercy, I just need to lose a little less quickly.
Thank you. I love that poem.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. It's interesting you're talking to God in this poem, and I feel like I've seen that you talk to God in a couple of other poems as well. What compels you to talk to God in your poems? Where does that come from?
That's a really good question, because I was thinking about this because I knew we would talk about this poem, and I was like, but I am not a religious person. And
But God is all over the place.
Yeah.
In your work, I feel like.
Yeah, I did not grow up in a religious household at all. We sometimes went to this local church, but it was more for the Chinese community at that church. And my parents never really talked about God or any religious texts. So yeah, it wasn't part of my upbringing, but I guess it was just everywhere anyway. And I think I just became really interested through poetry, actually, in different kinds of addresses, different kinds of figures that a poem, a speaker could talk to. And I just love that aspect of poetry that, in a poem you can talk to anybody.
Yeah.
They can answer you or not. But yeah, there's an interesting dynamic that can be suggested, right? It doesn't have to be spelled out or explained, but there's a voice. And I think the voice becomes more interesting once you have a situation for that voice, an occasion for the speaker to speak and an addressee to interact with. Oh, I think also poems feeling like prayers, even though that wasn't, again, something I ever did. It wasn't a practice in my everyday life at any point. But I think, again, in poems, I became really interested in that.
I mean, I was thinking about this poem as like a form of prayer or like a reframing of prayer in which the prayer is like a negotiation or a series of requests that are ultimately either not answered or refused. I mean, I also was noticing how there's so much emphasis on smallness. When you were thinking about scale with that, like the tiniest, these tiny little objects that appear in the poem, like what were you thinking with that?
Well, I think I was on the road a lot and just eating a lot of garbage. Like a raccoon, and just becoming fascinated with all the waste involved in it. So the ketchup packets,
yes,
so much plastic, the little utensils, and everything's really flimsy and sometimes difficult to open.
Yes.
And so it's like, you have your own little ketchup packet for your own little trash meal. So I know, I just find that fascinating that something could be so small yet big at the same time.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And there's something about prayer that felt like that. again, it's like someone kind of outside of it, kind of witnessing it more than doing it myself, but kind of wanting to inhabit that space of, having this one-on-one chat
Right.
with a deity, a higher power, or with the universe, whatever you kind of call it. And that was kind of the point of the title as well, which is also kind of playing with scale, the scale of the request as well, of like, well, yeah, like prayer is not really supposed to be about just asking for stuff to happen, but I guess it's often used in that
Yeah, I feel like
way.
it does go that way a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
So then I thought it would be interesting, or maybe kind of funny, to then play with, the size of the request, and to have the speaker who's really aware of how much is being asked for, and it becoming this real bargaining sort of game.
Yes.
And that really makes me think of, right, like the bargaining stage of grief as well, right? You're pleading, you're requesting. I'm glad that you pointed that out, that it is actually quite a large request, ultimately, for less loss, to ask for something that miraculous, actually. But in a way, it's like the speaker here is trying to trick God or the universe into thinking, oh, this is the lesser thing. This is not as big of a request as everything else.
Like, never mind all that, but just this one little, And you're like, is it really that small though?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think thinking about it now, I wonder how much of it was kind of tricking myself, into thinking, okay, maybe if the loss just happens less fast, then it will be less terrifying or devastating. When I kind of know that that's probably not the case,
Right.
But it's sort of like looking for anything to lessen the grief. But yeah, I was thinking about this lessening, this pleading for less personal suffering, I guess. Although at the time when I was writing this, I think I started it in 2021. So the pandemic was definitely on my mind a lot. It still is. But so even though the poem frames the kind of emotional trajectory as an individual one, but I think I really was thinking about this collective loss, or what is the space for collective grief, which I think we still don't get much of.
Yeah.
The time and the space to actually process so much tremendous change.
Yeah.
I think, we're in a culture that really expects such a quick turnaround for everything.
No, you got to get back to work.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about your productivity, your labor. Yeah. Keep the gears of the machine going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think poems can be this space sometimes to slow down, to quiet down, to expand, actually. So yeah, even though the lines get shorter, I feel like the pacing is actually slower at the end.
Exactly. Yeah. And the space around it is greater. So
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we'll take a little break.
So hopeful.
Poet life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's take a little break and we'll come back and we'll talk about the poem that you chose as your inspiration.
We hope you're enjoying The Glimpse. It's just one small part of the Adrian Brinkerhoff Poetry Foundation.
We're the founders, Peter
and Kathy Halstead. Our goal is to make poetry more accessible to everyone, and we do that in a variety of ways. Through partnerships, our film series, this podcast, and our website, brinkerhoffpoetry.org.
We hope these works will lure you into a parallel universe, the way a Mobius strip brings you into another dimension without leaving the page you're on. Thanks for listening.
All right, we're back. So I want to ask you about the poem that you chose as an inspiration. What did you choose to share today?
So this poem is called To a Dear Friend, Mothering Misery by Kamilah Aisha Moon. Every time your grief cries, you pick it up, cradle it like a newborn. But your pain isn't precious, not your lifelong responsibility. For each doting moment, your soul refuses to sing for days, and the world needs your music too much. Please leave it be, no more milk. Let it cry for nights on end, unattended. Let it forget how your heartbeat sounds, the warmth of your skin. Stop making it soup when it coughs, setting a place for it at the table, or buying it new clothes. Convert its old room into a sanctuary for things you adore. Let your ache become self-sufficient and grow apart from you. Walk out the door and forget to call home.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful poem.
Yeah, I love this poem. I chose it for the way that it also deals with grief, though in a very different way from my poem. And I remember first encountering this poem in grad school. Camilla came to Texas Tech and did a wonderful reading there. And we got to have a little conversation afterwards, and it was really lovely. And I just remember kind of looking up into the huge Texas night sky and talking with her and thinking about her work. And we got to see each other one more time in New York City when we were in Best American Poetry in the same anthology. And I just remember she went around and was taking selfies with everybody, and in just the giddiest way, and her whole face lit up every time, just like seeing each poet. And that warmth and like spontaneity too. And I kept thinking, oh yeah, surely we will cross paths again, you know? And we didn't. She passed in 2021. And actually, yeah, I think I'd already been working on my poem, but I've kind of come to associate it also with her work, or just the brief moments of conversation we got to have. And so this poem too, especially the part that goes, and the world needs your music too much, makes me think of her. Yeah,
I miss her.
Me too.
I feel like her loss was really deeply felt, I think, among poets, and it was interesting to be sitting with this poem along with yours about loss and thinking about her and thinking about grief too. You know, this poem's handling of grief is really surprising. I mean, that choice that she makes to personify grief as this newborn infant, so that we're put in this position where our instinct is to care for it and nurture it. I'm curious what you thought about that element of it.
Yeah, I love this personification of grief, or this metaphor for grief as a newborn, and all the things that one might do, right, to care for a newborn. The cradling, the doting, feeding, right, the milk. But then it all of a sudden grows up, the grief. There's this kind of huge leap in time by the end of the poem, right? Let your ache become self-sufficient and grow apart from you. And every time I read that, I'm kind of startled. I was thinking, oh, this whole time I thought it was a newborn, maybe a toddler, but now I'm imagining it as a teenager. Someone leaving home maybe for the first time, going off to college or some other new experience. And that last line, forgetting to call home, all of a sudden having its own life. And there's something really powerful about thinking about grief, right, as something that you tend to, right, that you're taking care of for a long period of time. And I really appreciate how seriously the poem takes that time too, even as it's sort of advising to let go, right? Please leave it be. But acknowledging that, yeah, it's going to continue, right? You're living with grief, right? You share the same home. And it's like the grief needs to grow up in some way in order to be without you. And it's such a role reversal that we get.
Yeah.
I find that surprising, but emotionally accurate.
Yeah, that's such an interesting idea. I mean, the idea of preparing it to be on its own and the life it will have after you're done caring for it. It will still have that life. You know, I feel like the poem, the ending feels so bittersweet to me.
Yeah.
Like, in a way, when grief walks out the door, like, that is itself a form of mourning. Like, letting that grief go is its own sort of grief, which I think is such an interesting idea.
Well, because maybe it's like what you become attached to is the grief itself, or the process, right? You become attached to the grieving. And yet, yeah, you need to prepare it to be on its own.
Right.
It's such a surprising shift.
It is so surprising.
Like, to think about growth in that way, too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's growth on behalf of the grief and the griever, in a way. And there's so much mercy, I feel like, in the poem. The way that metaphor, that personification is operating puts us in the space of completely understanding why the person would be nurturing the grief. Like, of course you would. It's so non-judgmental. It's saying, I know why you're doing this, but it's time for you to let it go.
Yeah, I think of my own parents who've certainly had trouble kind of letting go of their children.
So much in that word.
Yeah, to let us have our own lives and make our own choices, make our own mistakes, and learn on our own. But yeah, there is such a sense of, I think, both fear and kind of this responsibility, right? The poem says, not your lifelong responsibility, right? So every thing that your grief does, right? Like your kid does. But you kind of can't help but feel that way as a parent, of course, that everything is your responsibility forever. But then that can also get in the way of, right, not only letting your kid do their own thing, but to actually see them as a fully grown and developed person, right, with their own needs, their own dreams, and their own way of moving through the world.
Absolutely.
And I think it's so beautiful to think about grief that way, that it's not something you need to take care of 24/7, that it grows up in a way.
But that there's still space for it, and it's still there, which feels like a way of honoring it as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you so much for bringing this poem and, bringing Kamilah Aisha Moon's name and being into the space. It's really nice to be thinking about her again.
Absolutely.
So what are you working on these days? What's your next project looking like?
Well, I'm supposed to be working on essays.
You're supposed to be?
Yeah. I have a book of craft essays.
Oh, great.
But I've been procrastinating and just working on poems. But yeah, I need to kind of make more space for it. It's a different part of my brain, it feels like.
Definitely.
Yeah, to think about essays and the kind of clarity and like argument making that requires of me is very different. So yeah, it's slow going, but I'm really appreciative of the editors that I've gone to work with, who are all, when I'm in that Google Doc just fighting for my life, they are, they know when to be reassuring, but they also know when to push. And
that's a great skill.
To be like, yes, you put these two images side by side, but what, like in an essay, you kind of have to say what that means. And just, in a poem, it's like, yeah, your work is done by that point.
Yeah, you're like done. 2 images side by side.
Right.
Complete.
The implication of that. But
yeah, they
no.
want you to really connect the dots when you're writing prose, huh?
And I do appreciate the challenge of that too. Yeah, to connect those dots, to actually say, this is why it's important to me. This is, why I am thinking about it.
It's nice to flex that part of the brain too,
Right.
definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see both projects, the side project and the real project, whichever one is which. Looking forward to that.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking to me and sharing these poems.
Yeah, thank you for your questions and just for this whole conversation. I feel like I learned more about my own writing, and it was just, great to be able to talk about this beautiful poem by Kamilah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a joy. Maybe bigger than a ketchup packet. I don't know.
Yes.
I think bigger.
Way bigger, I would say. Maybe even the size of a ketchup bottle.
Wow, that's pretty big.
Yeah, we've graduated.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Camille Rankine. Chen Chen's poem, God, Gods, Powers, Lord, Universe, was first published in Narrative magazine. The Kamilah Aisha Moon poem, To a Dear Friend, Mothering Misery, was published in the book Starshine and Clay, copyright 2017. It was aired with permission from 4-Way Books. Coming up next week, Rachel McKibbins joins us for an unflinching look at motherhood, mental illness, and how she uses physicality in her writing. Make sure to like and subscribe to The Glimpse wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find episodes on our website, brinkerhoffpoetry.org. If you have any questions or comments, please drop us an email at theglimpsepoetrypodcast@gmail.com. The Glimpse is a production of the Adrian Brinkerhoff Poetry Foundation. I'm your host, Camille Rankine. Our senior producer is Jennifer Wolfe. Kat Yor is our technical director and mixing engineer. Editorial director Amanda Glassman is our curator and production coordinator. Amy Holmes is the Foundation's executive director, and our co-founders are Kathy and Peter Halstead. Thanks for listening.